Since the United States government signed the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, we've been wanting to actually hear how much Bitcoin do they actually have? What are their plans for actually stacking Bitcoin? And tomorrow, we're going to actually find out.
The Trump administration is expected to release its first national crypto stockpile report on Wednesday stateside, detailing the structure and contents of the government's digital assets. This includes holdings under the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and the U.S. Digital Asset Stockpile.
What happens if the government starts to actually buy Bitcoin? If they see Bitcoin as digital gold? Will other countries follow next? Let's find out. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go.
What's the next big thing to move Bitcoin higher, what do you think? Because it seems like you've gotten everything you wanted, haven't you, at this point?
Oh, there's still a lot more that we're looking for.
What do you want?
I think there's really three things that people are kind of paying attention to. The first is the United States government at some point is going to announce that they're buying Bitcoin. Creating the initial Bitcoin kind of strategic reserve and sitting the Bitcoin that we already had there was good, but that's kind of the, not the main dish. The main dish is when they start buying, and I think that will happen at some point. The second thing I think you're going to see is you're going to see some of the last standing people on Wall Street capitulate. And so there's a couple of firms that continue to say, hey, we think that this is speculative. We think this isn't good enough for our clients. I think that they'll kind of eventually give up and wave the white flag.
And then finally, Andrew Ross Sorkin decides it.
I think Andrew Ross Sorkin understands Bitcoin.
The very last.
No,
not the last one.
Okay, Andrew Ross Sorkin will be the actual last person to admit that he was wrong about Bitcoin. But even Andrew Ross Sorkin is going to have nothing to say when Bo Hines and the United States government come out with budget-neutral ways to stack more Bitcoin and build a strategic Bitcoin reserve, a digital gold reserve. And when that happens, it's not just going to be the United States that buys. It's a legitimate asset that every G20 country will look at. Listen to what Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, had to say about this.
Yeah, well, President Trump passed this executive order creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve and then a crypto asset stockpile to hold some of these other ones as well. A lot of people don't know, but the U.S. actually holds strategic reserves of a number of different assets. So gold is probably the most famous one, but there's a bunch of other ones that they hold. Like there's an oil strategic reserve. There's like palladium. I think there's a bunch of like rare minerals, and so it's kind of a historic step where the United States government is saying, actually, we think Bitcoin is another strategic asset which should be held by the U.S. government. This would have been unthinkable, by the way, like 5 years ago, where the government was so skeptical of it. And now, like, the United States government is holding a stockpile of these Bitcoin assets. So that was a huge moment. It kind of, by the way, now that the U.S. is doing this, I think the rest of the G20 countries and central banks are all starting to look at this.
I'm not holding my breath here that this will actually get announced tomorrow, but let's be real. There's all kinds of strategic reserves that the United States government already has that we don't hear about nearly as often as Bitcoin.
People look at these different properties of money and you can kind of score different monies. And like, this is partly why I think Bitcoin is probably the best form of money that's ever created, because it is scarce, provably scarce, just like gold or something like that. But it's more portable than gold. You can send a Bitcoin transaction kind of anywhere in the world pretty quickly. It's subdivisible down to like 8 decimal places. It's very durable. It's not going to go bad, and it's like it's fungible too. Like that if I have one Bitcoin, it's just as good as another Bitcoin, right? Like imagine if you had like different purities of metals and like, oh, is this one diluted a little bit, or like, are they hiding some lead in there? So yeah, I think you could think of Bitcoin as like a digital gold.
Bitcoin is digital gold. It's crypto with an actual utility and use case. And right now, there's a bunch of other crypto tokens and projects, Solana and Ethereum being two, that are being mentioned as something to replace Bitcoin. That's absolute nonsense. Let's not forget, Ethereum and Solana are unregulated, unregistered securities that have been grandfathered in because they were able to lobby the United States government. And now they're on track to become the bedrock upon which the CBDC financial institutions are going to build the dystopian future on top of. They monetized a token that doesn't have any actual real value.
The one of these that's the most interesting to me, I guess, would be the Clarity Act, specifically because I think the way that it was written grandfathers in certain blockchains and advantages them relative to what would happen if they were launched today. So if you look at the way the the legislation was written, it allows technologies like Ethereum and Solana blockchains to be classified as decentralized when they're actually not. And if they were launched today, they would go through a much different process than they're going to go through now that they're being grandfathered in. Now, whether or not this technology ultimately gives these other blockchains enough of a step forward on Bitcoin remains to be seen. It is my perspective that the underlying technology will ultimately win the day. So if you look at these grandfathered in technologies like Ethereum and Solana, they're proof of stake technologies. And what that means is if I have a big stake in the blockchain, I get to say what happens. That's exactly how society works today, and it's not really a technological revolution. What's so different about Bitcoin is the governance of it and its proof of work consensus mechanism. And so we tend to believe that the energy intensivity that's tied to new creation of Bitcoin is a game-changing technology. And so, you can speculate as to why things like Ethereum have had this pop in the past few weeks. That's my perspective, is because this legislation has helped them have a leg up. I don't think at the end of the day they're going to win.
I agree 100% with Bill Miller right here. Bitcoin is the only true innovation here, and that's because of the proof of work mechanism. We don't need another token created out of thin air. We already have that. That's the role that banks play today. And did you know that it's not just the central bank, which we talk about a lot on this show, that can create money out of thin air? In a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, Richard Werner actually tested a theory for, do banks actually create money out of thin air? And what he found out will shock you.
Now, to do this, I needed a bank.
One of the ways that you can become your own bank is to borrow against your Bitcoin. And you can do that safely, securely, and easily through a partner like Ledn, which allows you to unlock liquidity from your Bitcoin collateral without selling your Bitcoin. Borrow up to 50% against your Bitcoin value. So if you want a $4,000 loan, well, you post $8,000 in Bitcoin collateral. They've done this for over $9 billion worth of assets to tens of thousands of customers and have over 1,000 five-star customer reviews. They are the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Get started with your loan process today by going to learn.ledn.io/simplybitcoin. One of the ways that you can continue to grow on your journey and your Bitcoin journey is by not listening to people like Brian Armstrong talk about Bitcoin be the internet of money, but not actually using Bitcoin for its real properties, which is sovereignty. You're able to hold this bearer asset yourself. But learn how to do that not just by browsing Reddit forums and looking online or your favorite YouTube folks. Get an actual coach. Schedule a free 30-minute consultation with the team at thebitcoinway.com. They'll walk you through step-by-step how to remove your Bitcoin from exchanges privately, safely, securely, and confidently, so you can protect your generational wealth the right way. Go to thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin. The current issue with our monetary system as it stands today is that there's no accountability and there's no controls. And it's also becoming more and more centralized, with the central bank becoming the dominant form and money creator in our financial institution over the last 40 years. They are the most dominant force in the world that is unelected and has risen to power from the power that we've given them. And I hate to break it to people, this crypto stuff that's going on with CBDCs and Ethereum and tokens and blockchain is all leading to a future that we don't actually want. A future that exacerbates the centralization of the current financial system, giving more power to people at the top and less to people at the bottom. Governments and central banks want banks to fail, small banks specifically, so they can say they need to roll out a better form of digital money.
And since you ask about the next 10 years ahead, we have to talk about it because that's definitely top of their agenda, to introduce central bank digital currencies. Now, what is that? How does that fit in? Well, first of all, again, it's marketed in a very devious way. They're telling us, it's the old contract, this deal between the banks and the central bank.
The new innovation in CBDCs isn't bank digital currency. It's the fact that it's centralized. We've been using bank currencies for decades. Bitcoin is the only way out. And that's because it's money that's tied to actual work. The proof of work mechanism in Bitcoin is the innovation that allows you to have scarcity in a digital world. And its hash rate just hit all-time highs. That means more and more people are proving that this money is actually real. It's the only technological innovation that will allow you to send money without any banks over Bluetooth. So don't get distracted by Ethereum and Solana and all of this talk about building tokenized and privatized blockchains on top of crypto rails. That's not a new innovation. Bitcoin is the true innovation. And I hope that the United States government gives us an actual plan for how they are going to be stacking corn for the betterment of our country. One of the ways that you can continue to learn on your Bitcoin journey is by coming to Bitcoin conferences and meeting Bitcoiners in real life. One of the best ways to do that is going to be coming down to Dallas, Texas from November 11th through November 13th to the Mining Disrupt conference. Get 20% off your tickets by using the promo code SimplyBitcoin. Thanks for hanging out with me today. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.